What is an interesting, disturbing fact about the human body that a lot of people don't know of? So, you know how people with schizophrenia tend to hear voices telling them all kinds of potential crappy stuff? Well, what do you think happens to people who were born deaf but then get schizophrenia? It turns out that if they were taught sign language, then the voices come out as visions of disembodied hands signing at them to tell them the same kinds of crappy stuff. Also, people born blind apparently never get schizophrenia. Next story. I was just telling my kids about how if you put on special glasses that turn your vision upside down, after a few days of wearing them, your brain will correct your vision back to right side up. At that point, without the glasses, your normal vision is upside down and it takes a few hours to go back. I believe there's a paper by George Stratton about it. Next story. When you do not get enough sleep, your brain can actually start eating itself. Microglial cells, which are responsible for cleaning up waste in the brain, begin breaking down and consuming healthy neurons and connections, not just damaged ones. This process, known as astrocytic phagocytosis, increases when you are sleep deprived. Over time, this can lead to memory problems, slower thinking, and an increased risk of diseases like Alzheimer's. Okay, this explains so much. Why are so many stupid people about? Why do they seem to be increasing in numbers? Because they're sleep deprived. It all makes sense. That probably explains things about me too. I'm not saying I'm exempt, but at least I know now. But anyway, next story. So, located in the cochlea, in your inner ear, there are about 16,000 hairs called stereocilia. About 4,000 of them are primarily responsible for your ability to hear. If you lost all 4,000 hairs, you would be deaf. If you lose a substantial amount of those hairs, your hearing will be reduced. Loud sounds like machinery, explosions, cars, and bikes, and amplified music destroys those hairs. There isn't really a may harm or might damage concept, just the degree of damage done with these loud sounds might impact the hairs in the cochlea. Once damaged, these hairs never grow back. You have around 4,000, and that is all you will have in your entire life. The more you lose, the worse your hearing will be. Forever. Next story. A baby girl is born with all of the eggs she will ever produce. This means when her mother was a fetus, the egg would someday become her was carried in her maternal grandmother's womb. I adored my maternal grandmother and was extremely close to her. Knowing that she carried and nurtured part of me is such a beautiful thought. Next story. How about the recurrent laryngeal nerve? The nerve that runs from the brain to the larynx? Now, you'd think that in humans that would be a pretty short trip, and you would be wrong. In fact, the nerve comes down from the brain, goes screaming right past the larynx and down to the vicinity of the heart, where it loops around under the aortal arc, then finally comes back up to the larynx. And that is true for all mammals. In giraffes, the thing can be about 10 meters long. And the reason it is that way is that it evolved from a nerve that used to go from a fish brain to fish gills, and the shortest path was underneath the heart. But as fish evolved, their shape changed, and eventually they acquired a neck, moving the brain to a different place in the body. It's way easier for evolution to just make something longer as opposed to rewiring it. So the RLN just got longer and longer, still looping under the heart. Reason 4,821 why we know that evolution is real. Next story. Oh, okay. I learned this fun one after some dumb little embryo stupidly implanted in my fallopian tube and kept trying to grow until the tube exploded. Then, next thing you know, I was in a hospital bed, post-operation from life-saving surgery down in Oregon, one that I had no intention of parting ways with. Fearful that I had essentially lost half my reproductive organs, the surgeon gave me an anatomy lesson. So, typically when an egg is released by the left ovary, the left fallopian tube will snatch it up. Same for the right side. I thought, this is a bummer. Guess I have like half the opportunity to get pregnant again. Nope. My remaining tube can creep across my uterus to snatch up an egg released by the ovary on the opposing side. Next story. Bradycardic response. Had to search this term. And it makes babies open their eyes and hold their breath underwater. I did some sort of swimming course with my baby at the local pool. We basically threw the baby in the swimming pool and it works. The baby holds the breath like she did during pregnancy. No panic at all. Couldn't believe it at first. It's probably what you are seeing on the cover of Nirvana's Nevermind. Next story. Hold on to your hats, folks, because this is a good one. Men, remember the turn your head and cough thing at the doctor's? What's being felt there is the muscle wall of the lower abdomen. But the trick is, that edge to the side would be, in women, the labia majora. Feel up to the dimple above the chicken and over the top to the other side. Now trade chicken for clitoris. Same structure. Follow on down under, feeling through the scrotum, and you feel the bump/tube of the urethra underside of the chicken. Keep going and you'll feel a dent where the tubes of the chicken go into the body, but short of the ring muscle of the anus. That dent is where your vagina would have been if female. You see, male and female genitals are homologous. An analog has a different source, but similar form. Flamingos and baleen whales have an analogous mouth structure, for example. Both are designed to filter food from water. A homologue has a similar source, but different end structure. And here goes the story. Human embryos form from a single cell, graduating into a sphere, and then form a comma shape within that sphere. The sphere becomes the placenta. The comma, the baby. The comma head becomes the head, and the tail forms the spine and torso with buds for eventual legs and arms. But the torso is hollow and open at the bottom. Along the way, a T-shaped organelle forms in the opening, and further up the digestive bits are taking shape. By this point, the torso already has proto-nipples, so that's why both men and women have nipples. As things progress further, the XX versus XY dichotomy takes over on the hormone front, and the T develops into chicken prostate, testes on the ends of the T crossbar, or, for women, clitoris, uterus, ovaries on the crossbar. Male urethra forms from bladder to chicken tip, female urethra connects to just under the clitoris. Note that the male urethra splits the two erectile tubes to reach the bladder, while the female erectile tubes are separated by both the urethra and the vagina. And at the end, the male opening grows together to close the abdomen and creates the raphe, which is the stripe/scar down the underside of the chicken and scrotum, where that part of the proto-labia minora grew together. For the ladies, you get the clitoral hood and labia minora either side of the vagina. And to be fair, the specific starting cell cluster isn't exactly the same for foetal male and female, but the process is parallel and uses similar structures optimized for sexual difference. The end of it is that we differ by degree. Next story. The brain is a very needy drama queen in many ways. It often acts like a selfish tyrant when it feels the need to protect itself. It can and will jeopardize nearly every other bodily system to save itself. For example, fainting is essentially the brain's super cool way of saying, I want better blood flow, but I'm not getting it, therefore I will force the body to be horizontal. When you're on the floor, gravity acts in favor of better circulation to the brain than standing upright. The heart and brain are then on the same level. Other examples can include glucose hoarding, blood shunting, and Cushing's reflex, to name a few. Next story. That your stomach gets a brand new lining every 3 to 4 days. That's your body basically saying not to worry about the acid in your stomach, it's under control. Stomach acid is strong enough to literally eat through metal if it could, so your stomach needs that constant makeover to keep itself from dissolving. Most people have no clue that this is happening every single week. Next story. I'll use myself for an example. I have a rare trait called antimetropia. In simple terms, that means my eyes have opposite eyesight. One is nearsighted, the other is farsighted. Most people don't seem to know that this is possible. Even when I try to order glasses online, the websites tell me my prescription must be wrong because it's too unusual. Next story. Estrogen. It affects more than just women's moods. It rules our immune function, brain power, appetite, optimism, digestion, strength, pain tolerance, balance. Yep, it's legitimately harder to stand on one leg at certain points in your cycle. For those who don't know, estrogen is the hormone that decreases in the lead up to a woman's period, which is called the luteal phase. This is what causes PMS. Lower estrogen basically means every bodily function you can think of gets less effective. Less estrogen makes ADHD symptoms much worse, as well as many other illnesses or disorders, particularly autoimmune ones. Some women suffer so badly from the loss of estrogen each month that they become wanting to take their own life. This is known as PMDD. And then, on top of all of this, we look forward to a permanent lowering and eventual loss of estrogen when we enter perimenopause. This can hit as early as 35, but a lot of doctors are really reluctant to prescribe HRT to cis women, even though trans women take it indefinitely, because it might kind of be bad for your kidneys or something. They'd much prefer we just spend 50 plus years of our lives going through what is essentially permanent PMS. So yeah, as a 33-year-old chronically ill girly with an autoimmune condition, several mental health disorders, and IBS, I for one will be holding my GP hostage the second I sense peri on the horizon until I get the good crap. Edit. It sounded like I was saying it's easier for trans women to get HRT than cis women, when I'm aware this isn't the case at all. Getting access to hormones for all of trans people is an uphill battle, even in the best case scenario. Apologies for sounding flippant. Okay, so OP's comment here, and also some of the conditions that she's going through, reminded me of something that I want to share with you, fellow viewers. I tell this to everybody I know. It's called turmeric, okay? There's an article about it from thelist.com, but taking turmeric every day could reduce your risk of heart disease. It can reduce your risk of getting cancer,
It can help fight off depression. It can help decrease your risk of Alzheimer's. Okay, guys, this is getting good. It can ease arthritis symptoms. It can fight aging and inflammation if you take it every day. It can prevent the onset of type 2 diabetes. It can help fighting off many viral infection. It can relieve bad PMS symptoms by taking it every day. That's why I mentioned it. And also, it can lower cholesterol if you take it every day. And it can help IBS if you take it every day. Another reason why I wanted to mention it. It can help also fight off headaches and migraines. Guys, turmeric is awesome. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. I'm really passionate about it. And I feel great now. Anyway, next story. So, have you ever wondered why most all animals seem to basically look alike? At least until you become very familiar with some particular pet or something, whereas humans seem to be quite distinct? Well, human faces, like our overall bodies, generally from one individual to another, are very similar in shape. We are not really different from other animals that way. People just seem very unique because our brains are highly tuned to differentiate faces. Also, attractiveness in faces, aside from symmetry and masculinity/femininity, is mainly just about being the most average-looking face possible, meaning proportions that are most typical. Then, lactose intolerance affects half of Americans, and it's not a medical condition or flaw in any way. It's just not typical for human adults in general to be able to consume cow's milk. The idea that everyone should be able to drink it mainly comes from the dairy industry and maybe a little bit of racism. Cheese and pizza may be worth whatever the consequences are, though. It's also not normal for humans to be able to routinely drink alcohol safely. That idea also comes from the alcohol industry. Next story. When a woman is pregnant, small bits of the baby's DNA cross the uterus barrier and stay in her body even after birth. So every child a woman carried has changed her forever. Then humans have stripes, but we usually cannot see them. And on the same subject, a lot of women are chimeras and don't know about it. They have different DNA in different parts of their bodies. Only a small portion discover it thanks to situations that demand DNA testing. Next story. Most people think celiac disease, a genetic autoimmune disease where the body destroys the villi in the small intestine when gluten is consumed, leading to malnutrition, joint pain, ataxia, growth disturbance, and cancer, is something that affects Western populations. But it's actually turning out to be just as common. At around 1% of the population in Southeast Asian and African populations, as well as testing increases, particularly through immigration to countries where testing is common. The rate may also be similar in other populations as well if testing is ramped up there as well. It's also not a new phenomenon. It was first described in ancient Greece, and the Dutch famine in World War II is what helped narrow down gluten as the culprit for what triggered celiac. Children dying of malnutrition in hospitals actually improved during the famine because they were no longer fed bread. Next story. Studies have shown that trauma can be inherited through markers on a person's genome that persist over multiple generations, meaning psychological trauma can be passed down through genetics. For example, if your grandparent experiences a traumatic event early in childhood, say a parent's death, and lacks the appropriate support system to deal with the loss, the trauma they hold from this event can be passed on to their child, which in turn can be passed on to you. Next story. All of your senses, when stimulated, can wake you up except smell. So if your house is burning at night, you might wake up when the smoke starts to hurt your nose or throat, but not because of the smell. That's why fire alarms are very important. Next story. I had to start using hearing aids. I queried why it was so difficult for me to know where sound was coming from when in a crowd or a noisy room. Well, audiologist told me that the brain can instantly determine the direct of most sound that enters the ear direct, but it can't be so precise when it receives sound via hearing aids. This fascinates me. Next story. It's said that the human immune system is the second most complex thing in the known universe, beside the brain itself, which also plays several important roles for the immune system. And even though science figured out a lot of stuff about the immune system and the brain, there are still an unfathomable lot of unanswered questions. Scientists say they're still researching the elementary basics. There's more than enough for plenty of centuries for researching. Not to mention the many complex metabolic reactions in the body, with the countless types of proteins being part of the immune system and outside of it. Crazy stuff. We're just scratching the surface. I highly recommend the book Immune by Dr. Philip Detmer. A sneak peek into the immune system, and it's over 400 mind-blowing pages. Next story. The part of your brain responsible for talking is different than the part responsible for singing.
Some people that have strokes that damage the part of the brain for speech, limiting their ability to talk normally, can sing songs with words, no problem. Next story. The mitochondria originated in our cells because a host eukaryotic cell engulfed an alpha protobacteria. The two became symbiotic and helped each other out. Fast forward to present time, where our bodies require ATP, energy produced by the mitochondria, for functioning. There's actually a side effect of some antibiotics that can bind to the mitochondria and stop it from making ATP as a side effect because the mitochondria's bacterial origin. Next story. Our eyes don't typically glow. We would have to have a tapetum lucidum, an additional body part that redirects back any light into the retina that missed the photoreceptors in the first pass-through, improving night vision for the phenomena to occur, which of course humans do not have. It's kind of like the cat's eyes glow when you shine a light directly at them. This reflected light, or eye shine, is what we see when a cat's eyes appear to be glowing. But eye shine occurs in a wide variety of colors, including white, blue, green, yellow, pink, and red. However, since eye shine is a type of iridescence, the color varies with the angle at which it is seen, and the minerals which make up the reflective tapetum lucidum crystals. So ferrets, raccoons, flying foxes, owl monkeys, cattle, frogs, wolf spiders, bears, horses, reindeers, and crocodilians are other examples of animals that have it because they are largely nocturnal hunters/foragers. Do note, though, that even though humans lack a tapetum lucidum, there is some reflection from the choroid, which consists of blood vessels at the back of the eye socket. This is what produces red eye in photos taken with a bright flash. Next story. The human brain lies to everyone all the time. Decisions to do things sometimes happen well after they have already been done, and people believe they decided, when in fact, the nervous system did it for them automatically well before the brain was even aware and significantly before the mind could process it. But when asked about what they did and why, they're convinced they had made a choice. Brain scans prove this is not what happens. Next story. There is a gland in your chest called the thymus gland that creates T cells, which are cells made to destroy bacteria that enters the body. They are released when white blood cells are not able to control the spread of the bacteria. They are like the Marines of the immune system. The thymus starts to shrink at age 15. That's why as you get older, you are more prone to getting sick. You can slow down its shrinkage by eating food rich in antioxidants. Next story. After you die, the last thing to typically go is your hearing. So you could be dead for the last handful of seconds, but you can hear your family or doctors or anything around you still going on for the tiniest amount of time. So when people jump off of extremely high buildings, bridges, etc. to take their own lives, a lot of the times, depending on the height of the structure, the wind will kill the person before they even hit the ground, especially if you're inhaling on the way down. If it's not the wind, then it's a heart attack, and if not a heart attack, then it's hitting the ground. Also, sometimes after death, the deceased will sit up, groan, move, etc. And it's not because they're alive, it's because it's gas and air leaving the body. Also, before you die, 9 times out of 10, your body will have a burst of energy. It's like a false hope for you and your family and the doctors. And then, babies have all of their teeth when they're born, even the adult teeth. They're just behind the eyes, if that makes sense. Next story. When in utero, a fetus doesn't use its lungs to get oxygen since it gives it via the placenta. Because the baby's lungs are off, the circulation is set up to bypass your lungs. Instead, we all have a foramen ovale, which is a small flap-like opening between the right and left atriums of the heart. The oxygenated blood comes from the placenta through the umbilical vein and eventually into the right atrium. A stream of that oxygen-rich blood is directed across the foramen ovale into the left atrium, and then it does other circulatory stuff. Then, once we start breathing, the foramen ovale closes functionally within a few minutes to hours once pressures change, and over months to a couple of years, the tissues seals permanently. But in 25% of people, that doesn't fully fuse, and you're left with a patent foramen ovale, aka a hole in your heart. Depending on its size, it may cause no problems at all, or possibly increase your risk of a stroke. And I know all of this because I had unexplained heart palpitations a few years ago. Turns out it was a weird quirk of that particular bout of COVID I had, and I haven't had them since. But I did do a stress test and a bubble study in which agitated saline is injected into my vein and my heart, and it is monitored by an echocardiogram to see if bubbles appear in my left atrium. Mine took 3 cycles, so they are fairly confident it is a PFO, but over 3 cycles could also point towards something else. I kind of forgot about it after that since the palpitations have stopped, but I should probably follow up eventually. Next story. Light-colored eyes are structurally colored. It depends on how light is reflected and scattered by the fluids and fibers of the iris. Brown eyes also scatter light in this way, but are also pigmented by melanin. This light scattering is similar to how light is scattered by Earth's atmosphere, which makes the sky appear blue. Next story. Your nose can detect about 1 trillion different smells, but your brain often ignores most of them because it's wired to prioritize survival-relevant scents, like smoke or rot. What's truly WTF is that your olfactory system can identify smells you've never encountered before by combining basic odor patterns, like a chemical Lego set. And it's so sensitive, it can detect some molecules at concentrations as low as a few parts per trillion. You're basically a walking, unconscious super sniffer, picking up a universe of odors you'll never consciously notice. Next story. There's an experience called auditory pareidolia, the situation where a person will hear voices or music that sound like they're coming from the next room over, but it's a function of the brain trying to make sense of random background noise like an air conditioner. Totally normal, nothing wrong, just very disconcerting. Next story. You produce 3 types of tears. One keeps the eyes lubricated, another to clean and protect the eye when there is something foreign/an irritant present, and finally, the sad tears. When you cry, as in true stressed out, sad, unhappy crocodile tears type cry, cortisol, the stress hormone, is present in those tears. You really can cry it out. Next story. Every cell in your heart is a pacemaker, nature's backup to restarting the pump. Electrical conduction can now be initiated by any cell, causing a cascade in the wrong direction/flow, resulting in dysarrhythmias. Disease, trauma, and ischemia cause a disruption of the normal pathway of electrical conductivity. Also, fun fact, you can have an electrical reading but no muscle activity called pulses electrical activity, PEA. So check for a pulse and don't rely on monitors. Everyone, please learn CPR. Next story. The most dangerous time for an electrical shock to the heart, including from a lightning strike, is during the vulnerable period, which occurs during the T wave on an electrocardiogram, ECG. The T wave represents the repolarization, recovery phase of the ventricles. The vulnerable period, the vulnerable period is when the heart muscle cells are in a heterogeneous or varying state of recovery. Some cells are repolarized and ready to fire again, while others are still in the process of resetting. The risk: during this window, an electrical jolt can disrupt the heart's natural rhythm and throw it into a chaotic and ineffective quivering, known as ventricular fibrillation. In ventricular fibrillation, the heart can no longer pump blood effectively, leading to a sudden and life-threatening form of cardiac arrest. The R on T phenomenon, a lightning strike occurring during this vulnerable period, is analogous to the R on T phenomenon, in which a premature electrical impulse, R waves, falls on the T wave of the previous heartbeat, triggering a deadly ventricular arrhythmia. Next story. You can hold your breath 30% longer by putting your face underwater. Facial immersion, especially in cold water, stimulates the trigeminal nerve, triggering the reflex. This leads to bradycardia, slowing of the heart rate, which conserves oxygen. Then peripheral vasoconstriction, blood flow is reduced in the extremities, prioritizing oxygen supply to vital organs like the heart and the brain. And spleen contraction, in trained individuals, which releases extra red blood cells into circulation, increasing oxygen capacity. Next story. The majority of the retina is covered in a fairly thick mat of connected cells, nerves, blood vessels, and whatnot. The light-sensitive parts are under a pile of muck. Worse, most of the retina has a very low resolution. Only one small part, fovea centralis, is really HD. In order to capture a picture, the human eye zips all over the place super fast, taking snapshots of every part of an image, with the fovea doing something called microsaccade. Very poor design, or fairly standard evolution. Either way. Next story. Here's a cool trick you can do with a clock. Look away from it, and without moving your head, look right back at the clock as the second hand moves. Only works if it ticks and it doesn't constantly move. Or, if it's digital, when the second changes, if you do it right, it will seem like the second lasts around 2 seconds, then it keeps ticking like normal. This is because when your eye shifts suddenly, your brain erases the sight of the blurred movement and replaces it with what you shifted your eyes to. So instead of seeing a blur and then a second on the clock, you're seeing 2 seconds, even though only 1 second has passed. Learned that from Vsauce. Yo, I want to give a shout out to my boy Vsauce. What up, man? We're really close. We've never met each other, but we would be best friends, and he would be an Underspark narrator, and then the music would play. You know the song I'm talking about. Dong, dong, dong. Anyway, next story. Stem cells are wild. Dominant repair squads. Some stem cells can remain inactive for decades, then activate precisely where the body needs repair, like a hidden emergency team. Then partial limb tip regrowth. In children, stem cells in fingertips can regenerate bone, skin, and nail if the tip is injured. Heart repair potential. Cardiac stem cells can form new heart muscle cells, giving limited natural repair after minor heart damage. Brain plasticity boosters. Neural stem cells can generate new neurons even in adulthood, helping the brain adapt, learn, and recover from injury. Liver regeneration. Liver stem cells allow the liver to regrow from as little as 25% of its original tissue, a feat no other human organ can match. Then blood rejuvenation. Hematopoietic cells in bone marrow constantly produce new blood and immune cells, replacing trillions of cells over a lifetime. Skin renewal. Epidermal cells keep your skin regenerating, repairing cuts, burns, and abrasions faster than almost any other organ. Potential age reversal. Some stem cells can rejuvenate themselves and surrounding tissues, partially turning back the clock at a cellular level. Muscle repair. Satellite cells, muscle stem cells, can rebuild damaged muscle fibers after injury or extreme exertion, giving your body a natural super repair ability. And cross-organ adaptability. Certain stem cells can migrate and transform into different tissue types under extreme conditions, a real-life shape-shifting repair system. Next story. The left lung is slightly smaller than the right to accommodate the heart, which is mostly on the left. This is true unless you have dextrocardia, where the heart is more to the right, and dextrocardia situs inversus totalis, where all your organs are on the opposite side, or heterodoxy, where all of your organs are in the wrong place. Next story. Ticklishness is learned. Babies mimic us when we prod their tummies and laugh, so it becomes hardwired in their brains. In other cases where physical therapy is involved, the brain uses ticklishness as a first defense response before pain, which is why some things tickle, then hurt. Your nerves can sometimes lie to you about sensations to protect you. Then, similar to how you feel hunger instead of extreme thirst, if you are starved of both food and water, your brain will register thirst, then eventually gravitate to just hunger. It is trying to protect you because the sensation of thirst is maddening, but hunger is a sensation one can tolerate for a bit. Continuing, cartilage is avascular, meaning it has no blood flow, but ears and nose are the only things to continue growing and growing into your old age. Then the skin type that makes up the lips on your face is the same on your anus. Kissing one or both can still give you pink eye. Then you can poop every day and still be constipated. Your refuse should be thick and fluffy. If you have skinny little poop babies, absolutely take a fiber supplement because you're constipated. You can also retain stubborn weight gain from an irregular bowel. If you get a handle on your digestive system, you could lose weight long term. Our bodies tend to pack on pounds if we aren't pooping on the regular. Then, our brains can only really track 2 stimulating things on our bodies at a time. This proves to be quite useful when trying to give fussy babies shots. You distract them with a song, gently touch both of their elbows or hands or knees, and make sure they watch you doing this, and they generally don't register needles anywhere else. And finally, vaginas self-clean. Douches only increase the odds for complications or infections. There are so many more, but I find these super interesting. Bodies are freaking cool. Okay, women, that is absolutely correct. You should avoid douches because he will increase the odds for complications or infections in your life. But the human body is so incredibly fascinating. So let's give a shout out to Vsauce and the human body, everybody. Yay! Also, I'm so aware that I mispronounced some medical terms, okay? I know people are going to do it in the comments anyway. I know. I said archipelago wrong a few weeks ago, and even our dead subscribers came back from the live to point it out. Thank you all so much. Now I know how to say that word. I thought it was archipelago, but whatever. English is dumb sometimes, but you know what isn't dumb? The fact that you made it all the way through to the end of the video. So thank you all so much for watching, commenting. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.